Daf Yomi, Tractate Shevuos, page 6b, top of the page, bottom of the base, top of the page with the words Ve'im Isa, Shel Tzemer Deha Heimena Mibaele. And if it is so that Rabbi Akiva lists the different shades in their decreasing order of their degree of brightness, then after mentioning the reddish variation of Baheret, he should have next said the reddish variation of a wool white mark is darker than it, not that the reddish variation of lime is darker than it. Amri in hachinami ve'tanya Rabbi Nasan oimer lo shel Akiva shel sid deha hemena ela shel tzemer deha hemena. They said in response to this, yes, it is indeed so that Rabbi Akiva continues by referring to the reddish variations of the wool white mark, and it is taught likewise in the Brayta that Rabbi Natan says, referring to that Mishnah, it is not correct that Rabbi Akiva said the reddish variation of lime is darker than it. Rather, he said that the reddish variation of a wool white mark is darker than it. Umina lende azahi amrabaya makro. Im baheres levana he levana ve'enach heres levana. The Gemara considers the source from which the different shades of marks is derived. And from where do we derive that baheret is an intense white color? Abaye said, the verse states, and if it is a white baheret, Leviticus 13:4, which indicates that it alone is a bright white, and there is no other as white as it. Tanu Rabbanon baheres amuka v'chein roim amoik min oil kemar chama amuka min atzel se'et ein se'et el gavoa v'chein hu omer al kol ha'arim haramim ve'al kol ha'gevaot ha'nisaot sapachat ein sapachat le'tefeinu v'chein hu omer va'amar sapacheni sapachnina. The sages taught in a Brayta, the bright side, the bright shade of a baheret makes it appear deeper than the surrounding skin, and so the verse states, and its appearance is deeper than the skin. Leviticus 13:25. This is like the appearance of an area illuminated by the sun, which appears deeper than the area in the shade. The darker shade of A8 makes it appear as though it is raised above the surrounding skin. This is indicated by the fact that the word se'et means nothing other than raised, and so the verse states upon all the high mountains and upon all the raised up hills. Isaiah chapter 2 verse 14. The words Hanesaot and Se'et share the same Hebrew root, and both refer to something raised up in the verse for a Se'et and for a Sapachat, Leviticus 14:56. The word Sapachat means nothing other than secondary, and so the verse states, and he will say, append me, please, to one of the priestly classes to eat a piece of bread. 1 Samuel 2:36. This teaches that there is a leprous mark that is secondary and appended to a se'et. This is a mark that is the color of an egg membrane. Ashkechan tefela lese'et tefela meher v'lalon amar v'zeiro nemra nevona v'se'et v'nemra nevona v'meheret ma nevona v'se'et yesh la tefela av nevona v'meheret yesh la tefela. We found a source for a mark that is secondary to a se'et. From where do we derive that there is also a mark that is secondary to a baheret? Rabbi Zera said white, Leviticus 13:10, is stated with regard to a se'et, and white Leviticus 13:4, is stated with regard to a Maheret. This teaches that just as the shade of white stated with regard to a Se'ed has a secondary mark, meaning the mark that is the color of an egg membrane, so too the shade of white stated with regard to a Maheret has a secondary mark, meaning the lime-colored mark. Bimas nisan tana heiti lakasu lesapachat pensei lebaheret lemeloch kishem shetefel seid kach tefel lebaheret. A different source for this was taught in a Braita. The verse, see Leviticus 13:2, placed the word sapachat between se'ed and baheret to say to you, just as there is a shade that is secondary to a se'ed, so too there is a shade that is secondary to a baheret. Se'ed katzemer lavon, mai tzemer lavon, amar Rav Bivi, amar Rasi, tzemer noki ben yomo, shemechabnin bo lemelat. The Mishnah in the Ga'im, cited above, states that se'ed is like a white wool. The Gemara asks, what is meant by white wool? Rav Bivi says, that Rav Asi says, it is the color of clean wool from a lamb that is wrapped up in a cover when it is 1 day old in order to protect it from being sullied, so that the wool will be suitable for producing a fine wool garment. אמר רבי חנינא משל דרבנן למה הדבר דומה לתרי מלכי ולתרי איפרכי. מלכו של זה למעלה ממלכו של זה, ואיפרכו של זה למעלה מאיפרכו של זה. In continuation of his statement cited above, Rabbi Hanina says, the following is an analogy to illustrate the opinion of the rabbis, meaning the opinion expressed in the Mishnah in the Ga'im 1:1, that both a Beheret and a Se'ed have marks that are secondary to them. To what is this matter comparable? To 2 kings and to 2 governors, where, with regard to their supremacy, the king of this governor is above the king of that governor, and the governor of this king is above the governor of that king. The 2 kings are analogous to a Beheret and a Se'ed, and their 2 governors are respectively a lime-colored mark and an egg membrane-colored mark. Accordingly, the order of supremacy is Beheret, Se'ed, lime-colored mark, egg membrane-colored mark. The Gemara questions whether this is a suitable analogy for the opinion of the rabbis. But this analogy suggests that the shades are ordered this one above this one, and that one above that one, meaning according to their degrees of brightness. That is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, not the opinion of the rabbis. Ela malko shel ze lemala מאיפרחי דנפשי, ומלכו של זה למעלה מאיפרחי דנפשי. Rather, a suitable analogy is where the king of this governor is above his own governor, and the king of this governor is above his own governor, and the king of that governor is above his own governor. So too, each secondary mark is subordinate not to its primary mark. Rav Ada bar Abba Amar Kigon Malka ve'en kafta Rufila v'resh galuta Hai ze למעלה מזה אלא כגון מלכה ורפילה ואילה כפתה v'resh galuta. The Gemara presents a different analogy. Rav Ada bar Abba said, for example, a king and a chief officer, the vizier, and the exilarch. Each person in the list is more powerful than the subsequent one. Gemara asks, but this analogy suggests that the shades are ordered, this one above that one, which is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rather, a suitable analogy is, for example, a king and the vizier, and a chief officer and the exilarch. The list splits the four into two groups, each group containing one person who is subordinate to the other. The Gemara presents a different analogy. Rava said the previous suggestion is not precise because all these positions, apart from the king, are subordinate to the king. A more precise analogy would be, for example, King Shapur, the king of Persia, with his subordinate, and the Roman emperor with his subordinate. Amar le Rav Papa le Rava, hai minayu adif. Amar le bechurshaya ka'achil le pok chazi tiva deman zagi be'alma tichtiv v'techal kol ara u'tdushna v'tadgina. Amar Rabbi Yochanan zo romi chayevet shetiva yatsa bechol ha'olam kulo. Rav Papa said to Rava, which of them is greater, King Shapur or the Roman emperor? Rava said to him, does he eat in the forest? Meaning, do you live disconnected and unaware of events in the world at large? Go out and see whose coin circulates throughout the world, which is an indicator of a government's influence. As it is written with regard to the Fourth Empire, described in Daniel's dream of the future powers of the world, it shall devour the whole earth and tread upon it and break it into pieces. Daniel 7:23. And Rabbi Yochanan says, this is the guilty empire of Rome, whose coin circulates throughout the entire world. Ravina ma kegoin glima de'amar v'shachake sedina dechitana v'shachake. The Gemara presents a different analogy. Ravina said, for example, a new white woolen garment and a frayed one, a new linen sheet and a frayed one. Et shayish ba yedia atchila v'chulu. The Mishnah in 2a states, in cases of defiling the temple or its sacrificial foods in which one had awareness at the beginning and awareness at the end, but had a lapse of awareness in between while he actually transgressed, this person is liable to bring sliding scale offering. The sages taught in a Braita, from where is it derived that the verse that describes the liability for a sliding scale offering, Leviticus 5:2-4, speaks of nothing other than the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods, while the verse mentions that a violation was committed due to a lapse of awareness of one's state of impurity. It does not mention which transgression was violated. Vedinu O yemiz v'anash ala tuma v'chayav korban ala tuma mash kishihizya v'anash ala tuma lo hizir v'anash ela al tumat mikdash v'kedashav af shechayav korban ala tuma lo chayav ela al tumat mikdash v'kedashav. The Gemara explains, and it is a logical inference since the Torah has explicitly prohibited and also prescribed punishment for the intentional defiling of something sacred, and has rendered one liable to bring an offering for the unwitting defiling of something sacred. It follows that just as when it prohibited and also prescribed punishment for the defiling of something sacred, it prohibited and also prescribed punishment only for the intentional defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods, so too, when it rendered one liable to bring an offering for the defiling, sin offering, For the defiling of something sacred, it rendered one liable to do so only for the unwitting defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. Excuse me. Ve'ema truma she'ezir ve'anash loesh kachan avon mita dechayav alei korban. The Gemara asks, but say instead that the obligation to bring a sliding scale offering is referring to a ritually impure person who partook in the sacred portion of produce grown in Eretz Yisrael that is designated to be given to the priest, as the Torah also has explicitly prohibited and prescribed punishment for this. One who partakes of truma while ritually impure is liable to receive death at the hand of heaven. See Leviticus 22 verse 9. The Gemara answers it cannot be referring to truma because we do not find a sin whose punishment for an additional violation is death, and with regard to which one is liable to bring an offering for its unwitting violation. Sin offerings, of which the sliding scale offering is one type, are brought only for transgressions whose intentional violation is punishable by karet. Ema animile korban kavua avad. Gemara asks, but say that this statement applies only to a fixed sin offering. And we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow.